work. Oops, I don't want to do that. I don't want to leave. All right, can everyone see me? Yeah. Or see the PowerPoint? Not me. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, we're at the point allocations have been loaded. I know that Title II is still not in there, and IDEA, they should be coming sometime this week. I know that the load has been sent for Title IIA, so it's just a matter of the office that then does that upload. They upload it and then it comes in overnight. So we expect it to be appearing for districts here, you know, at any time. IDEA, we're still waiting to hear on the status of that one. We expect it this week, but haven't heard any more further on when that is, as well as the Title I non-competitive school improvement and the expanding opportunities for each child. Those should be coming in here soon too, as far as their loads, as well as those of you who may be receiving the rural funds. Those loads, the rural fund load was submitted yesterday afternoon, so hopefully it'll be coming up here within the next day or two as well, if you receive rural low income funding. So we're going to talk today about the budgeting process. And really, when we talk about, you've heard this, fund the plan, not plan the fund. Well, what does it mean? It really means it's a real shift for us, as far as for those of you that have been working in federal programs for a while, on the entire process. Now, I will say that there are many of you out there that I know already do this. However, this isn't always the case for all districts. So we want to really talk about the process for budgeting and how it's grounded within your improvement plan. So it all starts with the plan itself. And really, it all starts with the needs assessment. So the needs assessment is the foundation for not only your plan, but it's also the foundation then for your funding application that you submit to us. Everything, what you are doing within your funding applications should be able, we should be able to see how that is supporting that plan that you've submitted, your improvement plan, and it's supporting all the work that you're required to do within the district, as well as those things that you know that you need to do. So if you look at the one needs assessment and you think about how we changed the process, now that priority need that you've identified in the one needs assessment has transferred over into the plan as a goal statement. So for example, if you said that we need to improve in reading, specifically in our early elementary grades, then we're going to see in your goal that you're going to have a reading goal that might be a K through 12 reading goal with some specific strategies for your K3, as well as then, you know, some strategies and action steps for the rest of the district. We're going to see that alignment, we hope. So you're going to, when you select on that priority needs tab, that's why that is really the first page of your plan, because you've selected now your goal based on the priority need, and then you've looked at the other areas for improvement. For example, do we need to make improvements in curriculum or assessment, professional capital? Do we need to have some improvements? Those are going to be your topics then for your strategies. So for those of you who may come over and you see you only have one strategy and you know that you need more strategies, what you want to do is go back into that one needs assessment on that priority needs tab and select the other topics for your different strategies. If you come in and you see that you have the one strategy and you only need one strategy, especially for those of you that are only writing a 1-year plan, that may be the case, then you're okay. But if you want additional strategies, you want to go back and add some. Once you've identified what topics for your strategies in your plan now, you should have then provided us a description of that strategy underneath that topic area. And it could be multiple, for example, if you have curriculum and assessment as your topic area, your description might be that we need to align our curriculum and our assessments to the standards and improve our teachers' understanding of what those look like in the classroom and how instruction will best meet those standards, what kind of instruction. That might be what's in your strategy. So you've got like several things going on, and that's where you get into your action steps. So what are the different things in your action steps that you need to do, and in what order do you need to do them in order to implement this strategy that you've just described? Once you have that kind of laid out, now you are at the point with your funding application, and you did this hopefully when you did your fiscal resource and your plan. So these are the strategies we have, and these are the action steps we need to take, whether it's over the next 3 years or over the next year. So what type of resources do we need in FY22 to address or to complete these action steps and implement this strategy? That's where your fiscal resources come in. Which one of these fiscal resources can we use to help us meet this goal, and how much do we think we will need to budget from this fiscal resource for this? So everything now comes back to your beginning, which was your one needs assessment and your priority need that you've identified. And it's all going to link along the line if you've been able to do this. So what does the fiscal resource estimation do for you? For one thing, it creates that linkage within the system now. So it's going to create that linkage for us from your plan to those funds that you've identified. And when you go in there, you can actually see in your funding application on that planning relationship page where it has pulled over the goal that this is supporting or the priority need. And if you've linked it at the strategy level, it's actually, or the action step level, it's going to pull over this specific strategy and action step as well for you. The other thing is, it's a tool now for you to really start thinking, and hopefully you've already done this, about how you're going to budget this fund. Because if you've identified Title I as a fiscal resource for this goal, well, what are the types of things that you're going to use Title I? Which strategies and action steps are you going to use Title I to help you implement? And what are those things that you're going to need to help you do that? This whole process helps you embed that plan into the funding application by doing this. And it creates that seamless linkage that is needed, because if you look at the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, if you're involved in the Ohio improvement process, if you're looking at your reading achievement plan or your equity plan, all of it begins with the needs assessment, having a plan or strategies for addressing that need, and how are you going to fund it or pay for it. You have to have resources as well. And these funds are your resources and help you provide those resources. So if you're at this stage, and I hope you are, now you're ready to really start developing your budget or creating your budget. So what I recommend that you do is you go back, you look at your strategies and action steps to make sure that you know exactly what are we going to be able to do this year, because you're funding for just 1 year of your plan right now. If you've done estimates for the next 3 years in your plan, that's great. However, this year right now with the funding application, you're only creating a 1-year funding application. So you're thinking about, based on my plan, what do we have the capacity to do in this next year with these funds? And what are the resources that we're going to need to complete the action step that we've identified and the strategy that we're trying to implement? So you really are going to be getting down to your action step level. What are we going to do in FY22 to implement this plan and these strategies so that we can eventually meet our goal by our timeline that we've set here? So now you're thinking, hopefully you've thought about your strategies and you really want to start getting down to the real numbers for this. Going through and thinking about, okay, so to implement this strategy or action step, what is my staffing that I'm going to need to do that? Am I going to have teachers to help with that reading goal? More than likely you will, or if it's a math goal or an ELA, supplemental teachers to provide the additional supports for those students who are most at risk. When you're thinking about your staffing, think about your full-time equivalent, your teachers in that way, whether they're part-time tutors that are a portion of a full-time or you're actually hiring a full-time staff member. Think also about substitute cost that you may have to implement this plan, whether it's subs to cover for teachers during professional development, as well as the subbing costs for those staff that you are hiring in this program. And then you want to think about stipends too. Perhaps you need to provide stipends to teachers to implement some of these action steps or strategies, because it's going to be beyond their regular work day, or it's an additional duty above and beyond what their normal job description is. Those are things to think about at the beginning, and to get those kind of numbers through your treasurer's and payroll office about what this is going to cost. When you think about those numbers, you want to think about the fringe cost as well, because often what we'll see is we will see applications that'll come through and you'll have charges in there for your staffing salaries, but there hasn't been any cost for what those fringes are. So you need to really make sure that you've had a conversation with your treasurer about which is the district going to pick up the fringe cost for the subs or the stipends or for the full-time staff that we hire or part-time staff we hire, or is the fund supposed to provide for that as well? And if so, which ones? Because sometimes, for some treasurers, they say, it's easier for me to pay for the Medicare cost and the worker comp cost just out of one fund. I don't want to really deal with having to take it out of multiple funds. So no, the district will cover that, but maybe the medical costs, they want those to come out of the fund. Those are conversations that you should be having at your district as you develop these budgets. You want to, if you're going to be using the fund for fringes, you want to budget at the beginning of the year. I know sometimes you'll think, well, I'll put that money in there when the carryover comes in. But however, you don't have a substantially approved date yet for fringes. So if your payroll office starts charging those fringes right from the beginning of the contract period for that staff member, you're not going to be able to get reimbursed for those fringes. So you want to, if you're planning on doing that, you'll be better off to go ahead and budget part of the fringes in. And then when the remainder of the carryover comes in, put it into the fringes and maybe the rest of their staffing cost. Because the carryover usually comes in by October, November. So at least you're going to fund enough to get you until carryover is there to cover the rest. Another thing that you really need to make sure then is what are the contracts that we have that would need to be covered? Because you know, those contracts, number one, you can't sign those contracts or go into an invoice on them until you have the substantially approved date of July the 1st. However, if you've already had bids, you've already talked to these companies, you know that you're going to do it, you need to think about what do we need to fund then, or what contracts do we have? Some of you have contracts for staffing because you hire your staffing through a provider. For example, it could be through a management company. It could be you hire them through your ESC. That's another consideration on your staffing. So you want to think about what are the contracts, and then other contracts that you may have may be for programs or systems where you have to purchase those annual license every year to keep them going. So you want to make sure that you think about what are those costs that I have coming up that's going to support these strategies and action steps, and getting that figured out and you know, ironed out as you develop your budget. And then finally, the professional development cost. If you have professional development as part of your plan, you're going to want to figure out how much is this PD going to cost us, because those are typically, those costs are typically in your contract services. And you could have costs for stipends if the PD is outside of the regular teaching day, or costs for subs, as I said before. And then other resources that you want to look at is your supplies that you're going to need in order to meet, to implement that action step or strategy, and any capital expenditures. I want to say a little bit about capital expenditures versus supplies. Those of you that have been in this, been in the federal programs for a while, there wasn't as much difference often between capital and it always was, the rule was kind of like the lifespan of the object, whether it had a lifespan of 2 or more years or something. It was often then put into a capital expenditure. With the changes that occurred, now it's the $50,000 or more. It's considered a capital expenditure, so it would be budgeted in capitals. So most of your technology equipment has come down so much in price that it's going to be budgeted over in your instructional supplies item. However, something that has as well that has changed is it doesn't, in Edgar and in the uniform guidance, before it was typically your capital expenditures that were basically inventory. Well, now it doesn't call them capital expenditures. I think the term that it uses is products or property. It's property. So would you consider this property? And technology equipment is considered property. It's something that you would cover under, you know, insurance. It's something that has a lifespan. It's an investment. It's also something that has a high a high likability of being lost or stolen. So it's something that you're going to have to keep on inventory, even though it was budgeted under supplies. Now, typically, we don't inventory workbooks or those items that are consumable each year. But those items that last over a period of time, and we think we're going to be using them over a period of time, would be items that we would consider or typically we would inventory. So the general rule of what you would inventory in the district would apply here, as well as the expectation in federal programs is any of those technology items should be inventoried that have a high chance of being lost or stolen. And that would address then, that would apply to your tablets or your Chromebooks, those kind of items, as well as, you know, if you purchase an Elmo or a camera, any of those things, you would want to inventory and track to make sure that you're able to, you know, continue to have use of those items each year. So as well as before, you want to make sure that as you've gone through this, because in federal programs, you're required to have something about what are you going to do to engage your parents and community in the work that you're doing in the district, and what is the professional development, or how are you going to build your teachers' capacity through this plan. You want to make sure that you have in your plan and in your budget your funds for parent and community engagement and some professional development. It's very difficult to implement improvement work without providing those supports to the staff members who are required to implement those items. How are you going to do that? Through your professional development, whether it is through having an outside consultant come in or paying stipends to other staff members to provide that support across the district, or stipends for staff members to stay after school to get support and training from administrators and other staff members in the district who provide that kind of support, such as your coaches. So thinking about that as well. So once you have all of those things, and remember, then you're ready really to start plugging them into your budget. And at this time, I'm going to switch over to the CCIP and kind of go through what the budget grid means in those areas and what we expect to see in those areas, and then open it up for questions for you, especially if you have any questions about any changes that were in the applications that you see this year. So, and I don't see much in the chat, so I guess hopefully it's making sense so far for everyone. I'm going to pick on my buddies again. I don't know if Akron's on this call or not. They probably have no idea how much they're picked on. Of course, right now, you still need to switch over to FY22. Once July 1st hits, then you're going to have to switch back to FY21. However, a word of caution, you can't do any budget revisions after June 30th. So if you're going to do a budget revision, you need to do it now, because after June 30th, your period of availability to do that is over. and you would have to actually go back and undo everything that you did in that revision. We would have to return it to you and have you go back to your previous budget. So if you have any revisions, you need to do it now and get it in there before June 30th. So for your consolidated, you can see which allocations are in there based on your allocation page and the amount that you've received so far for your allocations. And as you can see right now, there's only just a few grants that have been allocated so far. What I want to do is go to the budget grid, and this budget grid is pretty much the same for all grants. One of the things that often is confused is the difference between instruction and support services. So instruction is anyone who's providing direct student services that would be academically through instruction. Support services are those other related services. And I'm not just talking about, no, that's not special education. We're talking about services, support services that are implemented to support students' academic development or their academic progress. So your support services could be your guidance counselors, your social workers. They could be, you know, a secretary who is supporting the fund or the program itself. For example, if you have a secretary that has been hired to help your director for federal programs in your district, their salaries would go underneath support services, as well as a coordinator for federal programs. Now, if you have an administrator, and that would be a director, executive director, somebody who's actually not only helped to coordinate the program across the district, but they are actually administrators. That means that they are evaluating staff members. They have full administrative duties within the district. Then they would be on your governance admin line. But a federal coordinator or someone who's simply there to support the programs, you could put on your support services budget line. Gov admin is more for district level administration, and they would typically be someone who would have administrative duties as well as not just coordination. If you have anyone on your Gov admin line here, then you need to make sure too that amount on the Gov admin line is the same amount that's on the set aside, because that is a district level. If you budget them underneath support services, then you're either going to have to put them on other on the set aside if you want to pay them across the district, if all of your buildings are Title I. If all of your buildings are not Title I, then you're going to have to take their salary and spread it across to the buildings that they're serving in their coordination work. Another item here that, you know, facilities is not something that we often will see anything budgeted in Title I. So that's not something, because you can't really use federal programs except for the ESSER funds to do upgrades on your facilities. So if you have a cost in facilities, you really need to talk to your federal programs consultant about it, and you'll have to get approval for it. And it's very rarely that we do approve facility costs out of Title I. The other item is transportation. You can use transportation cost for extended learning options or for cost for homeless students and their transportation. So here's a word, So it has to be beyond what your normal transportation is for all students. It would have to be supplemental transportation cost or additional. So when we're talking about extended learning opportunities, it's for before school, after school, summer school, an evening event that maybe you're going to provide transportation for. That's where you would have it. Now, if it's for homeless students, it would have to be what's above and beyond what you would pay to transport any student. So let's say you pick up a homeless child and they happen to live in a route that you're already running for the district. Well, then you wouldn't be able to charge for that homeless child to the federal programs because you'd be required to provide transportation to that child anyway. However, let's say this homeless child is in another district and the routes between the two districts meet. However, your bus needs to go an additional 2 miles or 3 miles beyond their normal route to go pick up this student. Those costs for that daily extra couple of miles, you could charge. Because those are supplemental. Those are above and beyond. You had to go outside your normal route to get this child in another district. Then you could charge those costs. Now, the challenge comes with tracking that cost. So your transportation director is going to have to work closely with you so that they're actually keeping track of the days that those buses had to go beyond their normal route and the mileage for that. So, because you wouldn't be able to charge on days if the child wasn't in attendance, unless you can show, well, you didn't know and the driver had to go anyway. And they would have to put a note on that. The bus went, but the child wasn't there to pick up. So those are things too to think about. Some of you may have an indirect cost. If you do, you need to check with your treasurer. This is automatically put into the system. So if you try to put in your indirect cost rate, you may get an error. I think the office that adds those in is working on those. So those should be added here soon for you. If you know you have an indirect cost rate, you can leave that amount unbudgeted until that indirect cost rate is there, and just put a note in the history log note for us. And we'll know why you left a remaining balance in your application, especially if you want to be able to get it in by June 30th and it hasn't shown up yet. So when you think about this budget grid, the top item is for those object codes in USAS. The side is really, they call it purpose codes, but you really want to look at your function codes. So you want to use function codes that are around instruction, or those items that would be budgeted underneath instruction function codes versus those items that would be budgeted underneath support services function codes. So your USAS code codes, you can easily print off a copy of that. It's not too many pages, and use that as a resource as you're working on your budgeting. The final piece that I really want to go over, and it seems to be an item that is often we have to make some notes on. It's on the budget details page, and it's the FTE. So I'm going to go to our budget details page in Title I. If you notice, most of our applications are very similar. We ask here for this item for your FTE. That stands for full-time equivalent staff. Now, you may not have full-time equivalent staff members. You may have part-time, but you have to figure out what they would be equivalent to a full-time person. So, for example, if you have a Title I teacher or a teacher that you've hired to provide supplemental math supports at the middle school, and they're there all day long, they would be one full-time person. And let's say you've hired an additional staff member, but you only need them 3 hours a day. They are a portion of a full-time person. So it's not, you're not counting the bodies. You're actually counting their full-time equivalent. So if they're only 3 hours a day, they're less than a full-time teacher, because most teachers are 7 hours and 15 minutes a week, or 35 hours a day, or 35 hours a week. So 3 times 3 hours a week is only going to be 15 hours out of the 35. And you'll have to get your calculator out and calculate what percentage of that is. I think it's about a 0.45. So for that building that you are providing supplemental math, you have one teacher who's working all day. You have another teacher who only works 3 hours a day. You have 1.45 FTEs under instruction. Be sure on these other items, we have next to them to explain specify what that support service is, or specify the governance. We're asking for what the title is or the position they are filling. We don't want their names. We don't want the amount that you're paying them. We need to know what the position is. And so that seems to be the areas that we find that we're having to make often the most history log notes for. It's an area that everyone seems to have trouble understanding what we're asking for. So that's what we're asking for here. A couple of other things that you may notice as you go through the building eligibility page this year has changed. And if you go to building eligibility, you'll notice that then the eligibility factors, we used to have many, and it's not going to let me click that and show it. We used to have like previously served, feeder pattern, rounding. We've added those to a drop-down box, as well as there's additional factors that are available for you to use. One is called a grade span averaging. So if you have multiple elementary buildings and you have one that perhaps falls below what the average is, what the threshold is, however, all of your other elementaries are well above, and you want to be able to provide Title I services in the district, let's say K-5, you can do a K-5 grade span average and apply that to your buildings to make all of your elementary buildings eligible for Title I school-wide services or Title I services. Another item that's been added there is the composite score. For many of you, because you're in the CEP program and it does that 1.6 multiplier, you have a situation where all of your buildings are at 100% or above that 75%, then you're not able to do grade span averaging. Using a composite score between your CEP identified percentage or reimbursement, along with your district census poverty information, and that's an average between the two, can give you another additional measure so that you can do the sort ordering the way that you would like to be able to do within the district. And those are two additional allowable flexibilities available for districts as they're trying to determine which buildings will need to have those additional supplemental services based on the building's needs assessments and the district's needs assessment in the plan, and how they've determined they're going to meet those needs in their plan and through the fiscal resources that they identified when they developed their plan. So that is one area that I want to make sure that I've highlighted for you. if you want to use any of those additional or new ones, there is a link on the page that has guidance for it, as well as contact your federal programs consultant, and they can assist you with those new methodologies. Another change that you're going to see is if you're the school-wide waiver page. In the past, those districts that have done a school-wide waiver, which means those districts who have a C or higher on gap closure for the building has a C or higher, and they're targeted assistance, but they want to be able to go to school-wide, however, they don't meet the threshold. They can go to a school-wide waiver, which is something that annually they would select and choose. There's the justification page for the school-wide waiver has changed. We're asking you to link it back to your plan. So what is the report card measure and what type of changes and impact do you expect this will have on the building being able to meet its goal? When do you think the building will be able to meet this goal, or that will have its impact? And then what are what strategies and action steps in your plan will the school-wide waiver help you to implement? So we've linked it back to the plan itself, your school-wide waiver. So if you go to the school-wide waiver, before it just had a paragraph to justify it, we've kind of broken that down now into different items so that you can provide a more thorough justification that our consultants can actually see and link it back to your improvement plan. So if you're planning on going to school, would like to do a school-wide waiver, please reach out to your consultant for assistance with that as well. Those are all the things that I really wanted to share with you today. I wanted to highlight some of the biggest changes which were in Title I this year, and also go through you with the budgeting process, what you need to do to kind of lay out your budget prior to you really filling in that budget grid, and the type of decisions that you need to make as you're doing this. So I'm going to open it up for questions. It can be questions, around the budgeting process or other things that may have come up that you need to ask a question about, because I'm sure if you have it, others do too. And we don't have very many in here, so if you just want to, raise your hand, I can call on you, or you can put it in the chat, or we can, you can turn on your mic. Hi, Ed, what's your question? I can always count on you for some good questions as we're doing this.
Well, I was working a lot with you on the plan relationship setups. But now on the budget side, I saw the consolidated start with the Title I, and I, built that budget and budget details. And then I saw Title IV hit, I think maybe even just this morning. So I was working on that. And then I get a little nervous as we get to the end of the month about submitting and when the system might lock out or crash sometimes with so many people using at the end. Do I keep waiting for these other things, like you said, IDEA and Title II to hit, or do I go ahead and submit, or will that lock me out then and I can't do the other ones?
That's correct.
So
you want to wait because if you submit, then you won't be able to go in because they are consolidated. They're all in one application. We would actually have to return it to you in order for you to do it. And you won't get a substantially approved date prior to July 1st. The system will automatically, even if you submit it today, your substantially approved date will be July 1st. So I recommend that you wait. We anticipate those coming in this week. Hopefully we won't have the problem of locking out. We have, they've done upgrades to the network and everything through the years. I can remember, Ed, when that used to happen. But I haven't really experienced it the last couple of years. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that that has been addressed. But yes, I do recall, and I'm sure when I was sitting there working at, 9 o'clock on June 30th. And then it crashed on me. And then I had to just keep trying to get in and push it through all night so it would go through because there were so many people on. I think too that as we've been in the system now for several years, everyone has paced themselves a little bit more. So we don't have as many that are waiting till the last day to try to get everything in.
Are you thinking that some will hit after January 1st, though, like expanding opportunities?
We are not anticipating them hitting after July 1st. As a matter of fact, the note went out in your history log. And you received the CCIP note last week for those 2 grants. So we're anticipating them before. Now, I will say if they're not there in time for you to budget it, yes, go ahead and hit submit because you want to get an SAD for your big grants,
Right.
Title I, IDEA, Title II.
Right.
And those, if you want us to return it so you can budget the others, just send your consultant an email and we'll return it. But I wouldn't submit it yet right now because I expect many of them are going to come in this week.
Okay.
You'll still have next week then to work on them.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from anyone else? See any more hand raises? I'll check chat. So Amy had a really good point, and that's on the planning tool. If you want to submit your plan, our consultants are reviewing plans now, especially for cohort 1 districts. They've already have gone through and reviewed many of those plans already. So that way it's just, they would only have to then review the funding application part after July 1st. So if you wanted to go on the planning tool side, you could hit submit there. And of course, even after you submit, you're still able to go in and edit. We don't have to return it in order for you to edit your plan.
If you do edit it, do you have to hit submit again in regard to the planning tool?
No, you're just submitting it initially for the initial. So that we know that you've completed you've completed it. We go in and we'll look at a change log. There's a change log to see if you made any changes.
Oh, I see.
After we've already reviewed it.
Yeah, which is nice because I click on that too sometimes when I see something's changed. I says, oh, who changed something? Because the treasurer can change things and things like that. If a school is not done with all of their 3 strategies and 3 action steps, do I wait on the planning tool? I have a little bit still happening in the school sections of the planning tool. But I think that will be done this week yet too. What about that?
You can, if you want to go ahead and submit the district's plan, the building plans will just update as they complete them.
Okay.
If there's any issues with any of the building plans, your consultant will add a history log note and let you know if they need something completed in those building plans.
We're cohort 3, so I know that, yes, we're doing this and we're doing the one's needs and the ed steps, and we're kind of doing some of those, but it's really a 1-year look, compared to trying to build the 3-year look. But I feel like, okay, yes, we're doing that. But you're thinking the planning tool may change a little bit as the needs assessments and some of the other modules have come out in this new way.
It's going to be a little bit more seamless for you and flow a little bit better when the new system comes. It's also going to help guide you more through the process than what we currently have. So yeah, there will be some changes so that the process will flow better.
I know my Title IV was a little bit less than last year, and that's strictly on a per student basis if they're looking at your student counts, or was it a preliminary funding and there'll be a settle update later?
Well, there's always a settle update later, but it is based on your Title IIA funding. Which is based on student count, poverty level. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So, and it's based on what we receive from the U.S. Department of Ed. So
here's a major thing I did do. I got a history log note or an email from the consultant saying, hey, you're not doing your feeder pattern right for your high school. You're not to use the feeder pattern from the middle school. You're to use it from the elementary. So in your next go around, make those changes. So when I make those changes, it kind of puts me over that limit now to actually try to make the high school a school-wide programming. So I put in their school-wide new, where previously I'd always done targeted assistance at the high school. So that's a little bit of a newness in there for this year, but I'm really using the notes given to me from the consultant to do it. So I think I did it right, but that's
yeah. So here's the thing. It is based on your elementary. So your elementary is your feeder. And it's your feeder for your middle school or your high school. So you would have to do your averages from your elementary for either one of those if you're going to use a feeder pattern.
Yeah.
If it puts you above the threshold of 40, you're not required to go to school-wide, but you may. So that's a choice that you have. You could continue to provide a targeted assistance program at the high school, or you could say, yes, I'd like to go to school-wide new. The thing is, to go to school-wide, you have to have had planning prior to moving to school-wide. So my question would be, has the building itself, do they understand and know what it means to go school-wide? Have they sat down and really planned and thought about what their school-wide program is going to be? If that really hasn't happened, I would encourage you to think about maybe keeping them targeted assistance for 1 year and then using this year to kind of educate them on what a school-wide building is and how it's different from a targeted assistance building. Because under school-wide, it's building-wide improvement. So you're looking at implementing improvements building wide. So every student then is eligible for Title I services. They don't have to do a multi-criteria selection process. Every teacher in that building would be eligible then for any type of PD or materials or supplies that are provided through Title I. However, they need to be clear about what is it that they're targeting that Title I programming towards in their building improvement work and how they're going to use it. So some buildings, especially at the high school, can do this very effectively. Others have a harder time doing this at secondary level and have chosen to stay targeted assistance just because the way high schools operate.
Well, I like that feedback a lot, and I think I would be interested in that. Do you have a Title I guru on that kind of planning side that we could say, hey, let's have a meeting with the
high school?
With the ELT, yes.
I would say it would be myself, Amy Hill, who's on here, is very well versed in the Title I in moving to a school-wide program from a targeted assistance. She's done that as well in the district. I know Jeff Tesno, he has a lot of experience in federal programs. I'm He may be one, but I would certainly provide support to any of my consultants that are providing that for you,
Okay.
Ed.
So would it be possible to like, schedule like a Zoom pop into a BLT meeting and then?
Definitely. We would love to do something like that.
Okay. And is it something?
Yeah, you could schedule it with your consultant. You could schedule it, and ask them to reach out to Amy or myself. And
Okay.
we could schedule a time to meet with the BLT and talk about the difference between targeted assistance and school-wide.
And I do.
And what would be required
here,
underneath
so
the different programs.
okay, let's do that, and I will follow up with an email to get that scheduled. We're probably talking though not until the staff returns.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, so my
Letting
guess
them get settled in.
September. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And I think that's sound.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that feedback.
You're welcome. I'm glad we could help. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. I hope we have some more. Do we have any other questions or anything? Any other hands raised? Okay, I see Candace has added a certificate. If you need a certificate for your LPDC, your Ippy Dippy, it's here that you can download from her, as well as she has put in the link to the PowerPoint that I provided today. So I'll stay on for a few more minutes in case there's any other questions, and thank you again for joining us. This is our last monthly session for federal programs. We'll start them up again in the fall, around September, probably. Letting everybody get settled into the new school year, and we know that most of you have July off and need that break, especially after this year, last 2 years.